tonight, perhaps the rain has already begun somewhere near you. It may be touching a window, gathering along a roof, or moving through leaves beyond the room. And even if the night is dry where you are, you can imagine that gentle sound now. One drop, then another, then many, each one arriving without asking permission, each one leaving without needing to explain where it will go. You may have come here carrying questions that do not know how to rest. Perhaps part of you is still planning tomorrow, replaying yesterday, or trying to build a roof over every uncertain thing. The body may be tired, yet the mind keeps working, checking the doors of the future, measuring the wind, wondering whether everything will hold. For this little while, nothing has to be decided. You do not need to know when the rain will stop. You do not need to know where every path will lead. You are allowed to rest beneath the shelter of this moment and listen to life arriving, one quiet drop at a time. And if you feel like it, you may leave a small note below with the time and place where you are listening, like a lantern placed gently beside a road. If these stories bring you a little calm, you may like them softly, and subscribe if you would like a quiet place to return to on another night. Now let the jaw loosen if it wishes. Let the tongue rest. Feel the weight of your head being held, and imagine an old mountain village after sunset, when the roofs were dark with rain and the narrow paths shone beneath the light of a few oil lamps. At the edge of that village lived a roofer named Sadan. He was known for working quickly. When a family needed a broken tile replaced, he arrived before breakfast. When a storm loosened a ridge beam, he climbed the ladder before anyone had finished worrying. People trusted his hands because they were strong, exact, and rarely still. One autumn evening, a widow named Luma asked him to repair the roof above her kitchen. Water had begun to enter beside the cooking fire. Sadan examined the tiles and told her the work would take 2 clear days. But that night, rain came early. It tapped upon the unfinished roof while Sadan lay awake in his own house. He pictured the open section above Luma's kitchen. He imagined the cloth he had tied over it tearing loose. He saw water falling into the flour jar, soaking the firewood, running beneath the door. Before dawn, he rose, wrapped himself in a heavy cloak, and carried his ladder through the rain. Luma opened the door and found him standing there, wet from head to foot. "The roof cannot be finished in this weather," she said. "Then I will finish it faster," Sadan replied. He climbed onto the tiles. Rain moved beneath his sandals. The old clay was slick, and the new mortar would not hold. Still, he worked. He pressed one tile into place, then another, while the wind pulled at his cloak. Each time a tile shifted, his hands tightened. Each time water ran down his sleeves, he became more determined not to stop. Below, Luma placed bowls beneath the small leaks. She moved the flour away from the wall. She covered the wood and made tea. After a while, Sadan heard her call from the doorway. "Come down before the roof loses more than a tile." He wanted to refuse. He had built his life around being the person who could fix what others could not. To climb down felt like failure. Yet as he reached for another tile, his foot slipped a little. Not far, only enough for his breath to catch and his whole body to understand what his pride had not. He descended slowly. Inside the kitchen, Luma poured tea into 2 plain cups. Rain entered through one narrow place in the roof and fell into a copper bowl with a soft, hollow sound. Sadan stared at it. "I should have completed the work yesterday," he said. Yesterday was dry, Luma answered. Yesterday you repaired the miller's roof. Then I should repair this one tonight. Luma looked toward the copper ball. A drop fell. Then another. Tonight, she said, the work is to place the ball. Satan said nothing. The rain continued above them. It did not become lighter because he disliked it. It did not become heavier because he had stopped climbing. It simply fell according to conditions wider than his wishes. Luma added a piece of wood to the fire. When morning comes, she said, perhaps the work will be to wait. When the tiles dry, the work will be to mend them. But tonight, the work is only this. She moved the copper bowl half a hand's width to the left, where a new drop had begun to fall. Something in Sedan softened. Not all at once. He still heard every leak as an accusation. He still wanted the storm to end so he could become useful again. But as he held the warm cup, he noticed that Luma was not defeated by the rain. She had not abandoned her house. She had simply stopped demanding that one kind of work be possible when another kind was needed. This is sometimes the quiet shape of trust. It is not believing that no water will enter. It is not pretending that roofs never break. Trust can be as ordinary as seeing clearly what this moment allows, then doing that without fighting the sky. Perhaps there is something in your life that cannot be finished tonight. A conversation may need time. An answer may depend on news that has not arrived. Someone you love may be walking a road you cannot walk for them. You may have done what can be done, yet the mind keeps climbing back onto the wet roof. For now, perhaps the bowl is enough. Feel how the bed supports the parts of you that have been trying to hold themselves upright. Let the shoulders become a little heavier. Your hands do not need to grip the tools of tomorrow. They may rest where they are, warm beneath a blanket, or quiet beside you. In the kitchen, Sedan listened until the drops in the copper bowl no longer sounded like failure. They became a simple measure of the night. One drop, a pause, another drop. The fire breathed softly. Steam rose from the tea and disappeared into the dim room. By morning, the rain had weakened. The roof was still unfinished, but the house was standing. The flour was dry. The fire had survived. And Satan, who had believed that trust meant knowing he could repair everything, began to understand another kind of strength. The strength to remain present when repair must wait. Outside, water moved along the village path, finding the lowest places without confusion. It curved around stones. It gathered beneath roots. It did not ask the road to be straight. And somewhere beyond the last house, that rainwater was already beginning its journey toward the river. The river received the rain without asking whether it had fallen gently or hard. By the time the clouds began to thin above the village, the water had already carried leaves, dust, broken twigs, and the silver reflection of the morning sky far beyond the fields. Several bends downstream, an old ferryman named Toma kept a narrow boat beneath a willow tree. For many years, he had crossed the river along the same line. He pushed away from the eastern bank beside a flat stone, aimed toward 3 tall reeds in the middle water, and landed near a cedar post on the western side. He knew where the current grew strong and where it became quiet. Even in darkness, his arms remembered the way. People said Toma could cross with his eyes closed. He never did, but he liked hearing it. After 3 days of autumn rain, the river rose. It covered the flat stone, bent the tall reeds beneath the surface, and loosened the cedar post until it drifted away. When Toma came down before sunrise, the familiar crossing had disappeared. A vegetable seller was waiting with 2 baskets beneath an oilcloth. She needed to reach the market before the best stalls were taken. Beside her stood a young clerk carrying a sealed letter for the district house. An elderly man held a cage containing a quiet white bird. All 3 watched Toma as he studied the water. "Can we cross?" the seller asked. "Of course," he answered too quickly. He placed the baskets, the letter, and the bird inside the boat. Then he pushed away from the bank where the flat stone had once been. At first, he tried to follow his old route. He aimed for the reeds he could no longer see. The current caught the bow and turned it downstream. Toma pulled hard against it. His shoulders rose, his hands tightened around the oar. Water struck the wooden side with a sound like cloth snapping in the wind. The passengers became still. Toma pulled harder. The more he tried to force the boat toward the vanished line, the more the current turned it sideways. The vegetable baskets shifted. The bird spread its wings inside the cage. The clerk placed one hand over the letter beneath his robe. "Toma," the elderly man said quietly, "where is the river going?" "To the south," Toma replied through his breath. "And where are you trying to go?" "Straight across." The old man looked at the moving water. "Then perhaps you and the river are arguing." Toma did not enjoy the remark. He had carried this man many times, and never before had a passenger advised him how to row. Yet another pull of the oar turned the boat even farther. For the first time in many years, Toma felt afraid of water he thought he knew. He stopped rowing. The boat moved downstream at once. The current held it, turned it gently, and carried it past the place where Toma had been fighting. For a few breaths, no one spoke. The only sounds were the river against the hull and the small trembling of the cage. Toma looked ahead rather than back. Farther downstream, the river widened near a bank of pale stones. The current there was slower. A branch floated toward that open water, turning in a wide circle before settling into the calmer channel. Toma watched the branch. Then he placed the oar differently. Instead of pulling the boat against the whole river, he guided its angle. He allowed the current to carry them south while slowly leading the bow toward the western bank. They would not land beside the missing cedar post. They would arrive farther down, near the pale stones, and walk a little longer to the road. The crossing became quiet. Toma's breathing eased. His shoulders lowered beneath his damp coat. Each movement of the oar grew smaller. He was still guiding the boat, but he was no longer trying to make the river forget the rain. Soon the hull touched the western shore. The vegetable seller checked her baskets and smiled. "The market is that way," she said, pointing along a footpath. "I will still arrive." The clerk held up the dry letter. "The district house has not moved." The elderly man lifted the birdcage. The white bird had folded its wings again. Toma remained in the boat after they left. He looked upstream toward the crossing he had used for so many years. From this distance, he could see how narrow his old route had been. He had mistaken familiarity for the only safe way. There are times when life changes the current before we are ready. A plan that once worked no longer reaches the other bank. A role that gave us direction may loosen like a cedar post and disappear. We may keep pulling toward a landmark that is no longer there, believing that more effort must restore the river we remember. But trusting the flow of life does not mean dropping the oar. Toma did not lie down in the boat and let the water decide everything. He watched more closely. He changed his angle. He used less force and more attention. This is the quiet middle path between control and helplessness. We do what belongs to us, while allowing conditions to be what they are. We steer, but we do not command the river. We care for the journey, but we release the demand to arrive exactly where we once imagined. Perhaps you can feel this difference in your own body. Notice whether the hands are holding something that is not here. Let the fingers uncurl a little. Allow the shoulders to move away from the ears. The breath does not need to travel in a straight line. It may enter, pause, and leave by its own changing path. Some nights, the mind keeps rowing toward a lost cedar post. It repeats an old conversation, an old hope, or an old version of you. It says that peace is waiting only at one exact landing place. Yet there may be pale stones farther downstream. There may be another path from the shore. It may ask for a longer walk, a different rhythm, or the humility to admit that the river has changed. Still, it can carry you toward what matters. Toma spent the rest of that day learning the new water. He crossed several times, never along quite the same line. He watched foam gather near submerged rocks. He noticed where leaves slowed, where branches turned, and where the surface became smooth. What had first seemed like the loss of his knowledge became a deeper kind of knowing. By evening, rain began again. Softer now, it touched the willow leaves and made small rings near the boat. Toma tied the rope loosely enough for the vessel to rise with the water. Then he sat beneath the tree and listened. Across the river, lamps appeared one by one in the village houses. Their reflections stretched and broke upon the moving surface, yet the light itself was not lost. It simply took the shape the water allowed. And the river, having carried everyone safely in its own curved way, continued south beneath the rain. South of the willow tree, the river widened through fields where the rain had darkened the earth. Small channels carried water between rows of winter vegetables, beneath low bridges, and past a lane where potters shaped clay beneath open sheds. By afternoon, the clouds had lifted enough for a pale light to rest upon the wet ground. At the end of that lane lived a woman named Angie, who made cooking jars for the village. Her hands were no longer quick, but they knew the weight of clay. She could feel when it held too much water, when it needed another turn upon the wheel, and when it had been pressed beyond what it could bear. Each morning, Angie walked to a spring above the village with 2 large jars balanced from a wooden pole across her shoulders. One jar was smooth and strong. The other had a narrow crack near its base. By the time she returned home, the cracked jar had lost nearly half its water. For many months, Angie used it anyway. She placed the full jar beside the clay trough and poured what remained from the cracked one into a basin near her door. But the young potter, who worked beside her, often watched the water falling onto the road. "You should replace that jar," he said one morning. "You made it yourself. You could make another before sunset." "I could," Angie replied. Yet she did not. The cracked jar also knew what the young potter knew. If a jar could have shame, this one carried it all the way from the spring. The strong jar returned full and useful. The cracked jar returned lighter, leaving a dark line of water behind it. Every step seemed to prove that it could not keep what it had been given. One day, after a night of steady rain, the young potter offered to carry the pole. Angie allowed him. He filled both jars at the spring and began the walk downhill. The strong jar pulled heavily on one side. The cracked jar became lighter with each turn of the path. Water slipped through the narrow opening and struck the earth in small, shining drops. "This is what I mean," the young man said. "Half the effort is being wasted." Angie did not answer. She walked behind him, carrying only a small basket of herbs. Near the middle of the path, she asked him to stop. "Look to the left," she said. Along the side where the strong jar had traveled, the ground was bare except for stone and short grass. "Now look to the right." Beside the path, small blue flowers leaned beneath beads of rain. Farther down, mint grew between the rocks. A line of young greens followed the road toward Angie's home, their leaves clean and bright in the afternoon light. "I scattered seeds there at the beginning of spring," she said. "I knew where the water would fall." The young potter lowered the pole. For a while, he watched one drop gather at the crack, grow heavy, and fall beside a flower. "Then the jar is not useless," he said. Angie smiled. "No, but it is still cracked." She did not pretend the jar could do everything. She did not use it to store grain through winter, nor place it beside the sleeping mat where leaking water would cause harm. She saw its limits clearly. And because she saw them clearly, she discovered the work it could still perform. There is a gentle difference between accepting what is and pretending that nothing matters. Acceptance is not closing the eyes. It is opening them without anger. It sees the crack, the lost water, the flowers, and the need for a different jar when a different task arrives. Sometimes we suffer not only because something has changed, but because we believe its value must remain in the form we first expected. A plan must succeed in the exact way we imagined. A relationship must stay as it once was. A season of life must prove itself by producing the result we originally chose. Yet life may be carrying water through a crack we did not ask for. Some of what we hoped to keep may be nourishing a place we have not noticed. This does not mean every loss hides a reward, or that pain should be decorated with a quick lesson. Angie never told the jar that leaking was the same as being whole. She simply paid attention to where the water went. Perhaps tonight, you do not need to decide what every difficulty means. You may only notice that your life is larger than the purpose you assigned to it. Something unfinished in you may still offer kindness. Something slower may notice what speed overlooked. A path that did not lead where you intended may have brought you beside a small living thing that needed water. Let the breath move gently through the chest. There is no need to fill yourself completely before you are allowed to rest. Feel the back supported beneath you. Let the weight of the legs settle downward. Even the parts of you that feel imperfect do not have to be corrected before this moment can hold them. The young potter carried the jars the rest of the way without complaining. Because he was listening now, he noticed the quiet rhythm of the drops. Some struck leaves, some entered the soil, some rested for a moment upon stones before slipping into the grass. When they reached the workshop, he placed the strong jar beside the clay trough. He poured the remaining water from the cracked jar into the basin near the door. "Will you ever mend it?" he asked. "Perhaps," Angie said, "when its work changes." That evening, they shaped new jars, while rainwater dripped from the edge of the roof. The young man tried to make every wall perfectly even, but Angie reminded him that clay moved beneath the hand. Too much pressure could ruin a vessel, as surely as too little care. So he softened his palms. The wheel turned. The clay rose slowly between his fingers, not forced into shape, but guided. Outside, the blue flowers closed for the night. Drops remained along their leaves, holding the last gray light. Beneath the soil, roots received what had escaped the jar. And farther down the lane, the small ribbon of water continued toward the fields, passing under fern leaves and over dark stones, carrying no shame about the vessel it had left behind, and no fear of the ground waiting ahead. Beyond the pottery lane, the water entered a narrow ditch that ran between fields of young rice. It passed beneath a wooden plank, carried bits of grass around a sleeping frog, and disappeared among rows of green shoots standing in the dark soil. The field belonged to a farmer named Naro, who had waited many years to work land of his own. He had once planted for other families, repaired their walls, and harvested grain that filled their storehouses. When at last he was given a small piece of ground beside the village road, he treated every corner of it as something precious. Before sunrise, he was already there. He loosened the soil with care. He checked the channels for fallen leaves. He watched the sky, tested the mud between his fingers, and counted the new shoots as they appeared. At night, when rain sounded upon his roof, he imagined the water entering the field and feeding the roots. At first, this attention was gentle. He noticed what the plants required and responded. If one channel became blocked, he cleared it. If the sun remained hot for too long, he guided more water into the rows. His work followed the field. But as the weeks passed, his attention changed. The rice in a neighboring field began to rise more quickly. Its leaves stood higher above the water. Each morning, Naro compared the two fields. He no longer saw his own plants as living things growing according to soil, light, seed, and season. He saw only the distance between their height and the height he wanted. One afternoon, he knelt beside the shortest row and held a shoot between two fingers. "It needs help," he told himself. He pulled it upward a little. The shoot seemed taller. Encouraged, Naro moved to the next plant and did the same. He worked carefully, lifting each green blade just enough to make the row appear more even. By sunset, the field looked transformed. The young rice stood higher than it had that morning. Naro walked home through light rain, pleased with his labor. The drops gathered along the brim of his hat and fell beside his footsteps. He believed he had discovered what patience had failed to do. During the night, rain whispered across the roof. Usually that sound brought him comfort, but now he lay awake, imagining how tall the plants might be by morning. His mind had moved beyond caring for the field. It had begun trying to own the season. At dawn, Naro hurried outside. The first row was leaning. Farther in, several shoots had fallen upon the water. Their roots, loosened by his pulling, could no longer hold firmly in the mud. By midday, the leaves had begun to fade. Naro stood at the edge of the field with wet sleeves and empty hands. Every plant he had tried to improve was weaker because he had asked it to become what it was not yet ready to be. An elderly woman named Sumi was passing with a bundle of reeds. She had worked the same valley since before Naro was born. Seeing him beside the damaged rows, she placed the reeds beneath a tree and stepped into the mud. She did not ask why he had pulled the plants. Perhaps his face had already answered. Together, they pressed the loosened roots back into the earth. Some shoots remained too damaged to recover. Others stood again after their roots were covered. Sumi worked slowly, using both hands around each plant as though closing the soil gently around a small sleeping creature. When they reached the end of the row, Naro said, "I cared too much." Sumi washed the mud from her fingers in the channel. "Perhaps," she said, "you cared too much about when." Rain began to fall more steadily. It touched the field without choosing the tallest plants first. It entered the ground without pulling anything upward. Naro looked across the rows. "How do I make them grow now?" Sumi lifted her bundle of reeds. "You do not make rice grow," she replied. "You keep company with the conditions that allow it." Then she continued along the road. For several days, Naro did less than he wished to do. He kept the water at the proper depth. He removed insects from the weakest leaves. He repaired the bank where runoff had worn it thin. But he did not pull, measure, or compare. This felt harder than effort. Effort had given his worry somewhere to go. Waiting required him to feel the worry without turning it into harm. Each time he wanted to interfere, he placed his palm upon the wet earth and noticed that life was already working below the surface. Roots were settling where he could not see them. Water was carrying nourishment through the mud. The plants did not appear busy, yet nothing in them was idle. There may be something in your life that you are trying to pull toward readiness. Perhaps you want a feeling to end, a person to change, a decision to become clear, or a future to arrive before its season. The wish may come from care. It may also carry fear. Trust does not ask you to abandon the field. It asks you to notice when care has become force. You may water what needs water. You may repair what has broken. You may speak, listen, prepare, and begin. Yet there is a point beyond which effort cannot enter without disturbing the roots. Let the belly soften beneath the breath. Feel how the body knows the difference between being supported and being pulled. Your back is allowed to rest at its present length. Your face does not need to reach toward morning. Even the eyelids may remain exactly as they are, without trying to become heavier. Weeks later, Naro's field stood green beneath a clear sky. It was not the tallest field in the valley. Some rows remained uneven where the damaged plants had recovered at different speeds. Yet the roots held. When wind crossed the water, the rice bent together and rose again. Naro stopped counting the leaves. He began listening instead. To frogs beneath the banks, to water entering the channels, to the small tapping of evening rain on his hat. The field had not obeyed him. It had taught him how to stay near without tightening his hands. One night, he returned home after checking the final gate. Rain settled over the village and moved across his roof in 1,000 soft touches. Naro lay down without measuring what the plants had gained that day. Under the dark water, unseen roots continued their patient work. Beneath the flooded field, the roots continued without noise. They did not announce each grain of earth they touched, or count the hours until harvest. Above them, evening gathered over the valley, and the rain moved from the open fields toward the clustered roofs of the village. In a small house beside the road lived a girl named May with her grandmother. Their roof was old, though not broken. When rain fell lightly, it made a soft pattern across the tiles. When the clouds grew heavy, one drop sometimes found its way through a narrow seam above the sleeping room. May did not like that drop. Her grandmother placed a clay bowl beneath it, and each drop landed with a clear sound. Tap. A pause. Tap. To the grandmother, it was only water meeting clay. To May, it became a task. She lay beneath her blanket and began to count. 1, 2, 3. The spaces between the drops were uneven. Sometimes 2 arrived close together. Sometimes the roof remained silent long enough for May to wonder whether the leaking had stopped. Then another drop would fall, and she would begin again because she was no longer sure of the number. At 27, she lost her place. At 43, the wind shook rain from the branches outside, and several sounds struck the roof at once. At 60, she sat up. Her grandmother was mending a sleeve beside a small lamp. The needle passed through the cloth and returned, drawing a dark thread behind it.
"How many drops will there be?"
May asked. Her grandmother looked at the bowl.
"Tonight?"
"Yes." "I do not know." May frowned.
"But when will it become full?"
"I do not know that either." The answer did not comfort her. She wanted the rain to have an amount, the bowl to have an exact ending, and the night to become something she could understand before closing her eyes. She returned to counting. Her grandmother continued sewing. Now and then she adjusted the lamp wick. The room smelled of warm oil, damp wood, and the ginger tea they had shared after supper. When May reached 100, the bowl was not full. She felt as though the rain had tricked her. She had given it her attention, yet it had not rewarded her with completion.
"I will stay awake until the last drop,"
she said. Her grandmother placed the mended sleeve in her basket. "Then you may have a long wait. What if the roof leaks all night? Then it leaks all night. What if it is still raining in the morning? Then morning will be rainy." May pulled the blanket tightly around her shoulders. The simplicity of these answers made her restless. She believed there must be some better response, some thought strong enough to close the seam in the roof or hurry the clouds across the mountain. Her grandmother moved the lamp closer to the bowl. A small circle of light appeared on the water inside it. Each falling drop broke the circle, and each time the surface became still again. "Watch without counting," she said. May tried. A drop entered the bowl. The lamplight opened into rings, stretched toward the edge, and returned. Another drop arrived before the water had fully settled, creating new circles inside the old ones. For a while, May still counted silently. The numbers followed each sound like small attendants, but as she watched the light move, she began to forget which number should come next. The rain did not become meaningless when she stopped measuring it. In some way, it became more present. She heard the deep sound of water along the gutter, the finer whisper on the leaves, and the occasional heavy drop falling from the roof edge into the garden below. There had never been only one rain. There was rain on tile, rain on earth, rain slipping down bamboo, rain gathering in the clay bowl. Her counting had reduced the whole night to a single line of numbers. When the numbers loosened, the room became wider. Perhaps the mind does something similar when it wants certainty. It counts the days until an answer, the signs that a person cares, the mistakes already made, the tasks still waiting, or the hours of sleep that remain before morning. Counting can be useful. It helps us keep Bryce, share work, and remember a journey. Yet sometimes counting becomes a small fence built around what cannot be contained. Life continues beyond the number we have reached. You may know this feeling tonight. Perhaps you have been measuring your progress against someone else's path. Perhaps you have counted how many times a worry returned and wondered why it has not vanished. Perhaps you are watching the hours pass, believing rest must be captured before too much night is gone. For a moment, you may let the next drop arrive without giving it a number. Notice the space before it. Notice the sound itself. Then notice how it is already gone. The breath can be received in the same way. There is no need to remember how many breaths have passed. This one enters, this one leaves. The chest rises a little, then settles. The blanket holds its quiet weight across the body. Your jaw may soften without reporting that it has softened. The muscles around the eyes may rest without proving how close sleep has come. May lowered her head onto the folded cloth that served as her pillow. She could still hear the bowl, but she no longer felt responsible for reaching the final drop. Her grandmother dimmed the lamp. In the weaker light, the circle on the water became less clear. It appeared, trembled, and disappeared into shadow. May listened to 3 more drops, or perhaps 5. She did not know. "Grandmother," she whispered, "who will count while I sleep?" "No one," came the answer. May considered this. The rain would continue without being watched. The bowl would fill without being urged. If it became full, her grandmother would empty it. If the rain stopped, silence would take its place. The night did not need a keeper. Her fingers released the edge of the blanket. Her breathing found a slower rhythm, not because she commanded it, but because there was nothing left to finish. Outside, water moved along the eaves and fell into the garden. It darkened the soil around a plum tree, entered the narrow spaces between stones, and sank toward roots hidden below the house. By the time the bowl was half full, May was asleep. The drops continued to arrive, each complete in itself, each leaving no unfinished work for the one that followed. And beneath the old roof, the night remained uncounted. Before dawn, while May slept beneath the old roof, the rain crossed the village and reached the monastery kitchen on the lower slope. There, it struck broad tiles blackened by years of smoke, ran through carved gutters, and fell beside stacked bundles of firewood. The cook, Jorin, had risen early to prepare rice porridge for the monks, workers, and travelers who would gather after the morning bell. He carried an iron lamp into the kitchen, opened the shutters, and found that the wind had driven rain beneath the shelter during the night. Half the firewood was wet. Jorin touched one bundle, then another. Water darkened the bark. The smaller pieces were damp all the way through. He had cooked in rain before, but this morning the storeroom was nearly empty, and a group of road workers had arrived unexpectedly the previous evening. There would be many bowls to fill. He arranged the least wet pieces beneath the stove and struck a spark. A thin flame appeared, trembled, and vanished. He tried again. Smoke rose into his face. The wood hissed, and a drop of water escaped from one split branch onto the ash. Jorin added more kindling. He bent close and blew until his cheeks hurt. For a moment, the flame grew bright. Then the wet wood pressed it down beneath a gray cloud of smoke. His eyes watered. His robe smelled of soot. Beyond the kitchen wall, rain continued with patient steadiness. "This should burn," he whispered. He had prepared the wood himself. He had stacked it beneath the roof. He had checked the covering 2 nights before. The storm had entered from an unusual direction, and now the morning meal seemed to depend upon wood that refused to become dry simply because it was needed. Jorin struck the flint again and again. A novice named Paula entered, carrying an empty water bucket. She stopped when she saw the smoke filling the kitchen.
Shall I open the upper vent?
She asked.
The fire will lose heat.
Paula looked at the stove, where no fire remained. Joran noticed her glance and felt irritation rise inside him. He wanted the kitchen to prove that his preparation had been sufficient. He wanted the wet branches to behave like dry ones. Most of all, he wanted no one to see that his usual skill had reached a condition it could not command. He placed another branch over the coals. Smoke rolled outward. Paula opened the vent without speaking. Cold air entered, but the room cleared enough for Joran to breathe. He sat back on his heels. Through the open shutter, he could see water dripping from the edge of the roof into a stone basin. Each drop entered cleanly. Nothing outside appeared offended by the delay in breakfast. "What food does not need a strong fire?" Paula asked. Joran almost replied that porridge needed one. Then he looked around the kitchen. On a shelf stood jars of roasted grain prepared for journeys. There were dried plums, pickled vegetables, sesame paste, and yesterday's cooked rice kept in a covered pot. None of it matched the meal he had planned. Yet hunger had not asked for his plan. It had asked for nourishment. They carried a small brazier to the covered passage, where a bundle of charcoal remained dry. The heat would not be enough for a large pot, but it could warm water slowly. Paula crushed roasted grain into bowls, while Joran sliced the dried plums. He mixed the cold rice with sesame paste and shaped it into small rounds. The meal became simpler, quieter, and unlike any breakfast he had served before. When the bell sounded, the road workers entered with wet sleeves and tired faces. Joran placed the bowls before them with an apology. "The storm changed the kitchen," he said. One worker lifted the warm cup between both hands. Then the kitchen changed with the storm. He drank, and the others began to eat. No one complained. The roasted grain softened in warm water. The plums gave a little sweetness. Steam rose from the cups and mingled with the cool air of the hall. What Joran had first seen as a failed meal became exactly enough for a rainy morning. Later, when the sky brightened, he spread the wet wood beneath the eaves. He did not call it dry. He did not ask it to burn before the sun and air had done their part. He turned each piece so the damp side faced outward, then left space between the branches. This too was cooking, though no pot stood above it. There are moments when the mind becomes like Joran before the smoking stove. It believes that because a certain outcome is necessary, the conditions must obey. It adds more effort, more thought, more pressure. When the flame disappears, it concludes that it has failed and tries the same movement with greater force. But wisdom sometimes begins by opening the vent. It lets us breathe clearly enough to see what else is present. A different meal, a smaller flame, help from another person, a task that belongs to sunlight rather than willpower. Trusting life does not always feel like moving forward. At times, it feels like changing the definition of what forward means. Perhaps something you hoped to accomplish today remains unfinished. Perhaps your energy was different from what you expected. Perhaps another person, the weather, the body, or simple circumstance changed the shape of what could be done. You may acknowledge that without turning it into a judgment of your worth. Feel the air moving gently through the nose. If the chest has been working like a smoky room, perhaps it can clear a little now. Allow a small space around the breath. Let the shoulders rest farther from their work. Your hands need not keep striking sparks in the dark. Some conditions require effort. Others require time. A few require us to notice that the meal can be made another way. By late afternoon, a mild wind passed beneath the monastery eaves. Joran turned the branches once more. They were still damp, but lighter than before. He could smell wet cedar, clean stone, and the last smoke leaving his robe. That evening, he used the charcoal to heat a modest pot of soup. Beside the stove, Paula placed one dry branch that had rested all day beneath the moving air. Joran touched a flame to its edge. This time, it caught without struggle. He watched the fire travel along the grain at its own pace. He did not praise it for burning or blame it for having been wet. He simply added the next piece when the first was ready. Outside, rainwater still fell from the roof in slower drops. Inside, the soup warmed. The smoke rose cleanly through the open vent, and the kitchen received the evening exactly as it came. The warmth of the evening soup remained in the monastery hall after the bowls had been cleared. It clung to the wooden tables, to the workers' damp coats, and to the quiet breath of those who had eaten. Outside, the rain had thinned, but the road below the mountain was still dark with water. One of those roads led to a small house where a woman named Leanne lived with her son, Arun. He had gone to the market that morning to sell woven baskets and buy lamp oil, salt, and medicine for an old neighbor. He had expected to return before sunset. Sunset passed. Leanne placed a lamp near the window. At first, she continued with the evening work. She folded cloth, swept the floor, and covered the pot of rice. Whenever rain struck the roof more loudly, she paused and listened for footsteps beyond the gate. There were none. She opened the door and looked down the road. Water shone between the stones. Bamboo leaned beneath the weight of the rain. Farther away, the path disappeared into mist. Leanne closed the door, returned to the table, and tried to mend a torn sleeve. Before she had finished 3 stitches, she thought she heard a cartwheel. She rose, opened the door, and found only water running along the ditch. A little later, she heard a cough outside. Again, she went to the gate. It was a branch rubbing against the wall. Each time she opened the house, cold air entered. The lamp flame bent. Rain gathered on the floorboards. Yet Leanne could not remain seated. Her love had taken the shape of watching, and she feared that if she stopped watching, something might happen beyond her care. An elderly neighbor named Vea came to return a covered bowl. She found Leanne standing at the doorway with one hand on the latch. "Has Arun returned?" Vea asked. "Not yet. The lower bridge may be flooded. He will have to take the long road." Leanne looked into the darkness. "Then I should go and meet him." Vea glanced at Leanne's thin sandals and the water moving across the lane. Would he take the long road, or the path through the cedar grove? I do not know. Would he stop at the mill, or wait beneath the market shelter? I do not know. Vea placed the bowl on the table. Then you may spend the whole night walking away from the road he chooses. Leanne did not answer. The thought of waiting felt unbearable. But the thought of searching, without knowing where to search, felt no wiser. Vea lifted the lamp from the window and set it beneath the covered porch, where its light could be seen from the gate without filling with rain. "Keep the light," she said. "Keep the rice warm. Let the road belong to his feet." Then she returned to her own house. Leanne stood beneath the porch. A drop fell from the roof edge and struck the stone beside her. Another followed. She wanted certainty, not advice. She wanted the rain to open and reveal her son walking safely toward home. But the road remained empty. At last, she went inside. She added a little water to the rice so it would not dry. She placed Arun's cup beside the pot. Then she sat near the door, not with her hand on the latch, but with both hands resting in her lap. The waiting did not immediately become peaceful. Her mind still traveled farther than her body. It pictured the flooded bridge, the dark grove, a broken cart, a twisted ankle, 1,000 events made from fear rather than knowledge. Each time an image appeared, Lian looked at what was actually before her. The lamp beneath the porch was burning. The rice was warm. The door was closed against the rain. Her own breath was entering and leaving. These things did not tell her where Arun was. They only returned her to where she was. There is a kind of love that tries to travel every road at once. It wants to stand beside each person we care for, prevent every mistake, and arrive before every danger. When it cannot, it may turn into restless watching, as though worry were a rope long enough to pull someone safely home. But worry cannot walk another person's path. It can only exhaust the one who holds it. Trust does not mean that Lian stopped caring. She kept the lamp lit. She kept food ready. If real help had been possible, she would have offered it. Yet she began to see the difference between loving someone and trying to control the unseen world around them. Perhaps someone you love is walking a road you cannot enter tonight. Their choices may be uncertain. Their timing may be different from yours. You may wish to protect them from disappointment, loneliness, or change. The heart can remain open without following every fearful thought into the rain. Feel where your own body has been standing at an inner doorway. Perhaps the chest has leaned forward, listening. Perhaps the shoulders have stayed lifted, ready to respond. You may let the back meet the bed more fully. Let the hands be empty for a few breaths. The lamp of care can remain, without the body keeping watch over the whole night. Lian listened as rain moved across the roof. She noticed that the sound changed from one side of the house to the other. A gust would bring many drops at once, then the tiles would grow quiet. The storm was not one unbroken thing. It arrived in waves, each one passing into the next. Sometime later, she heard footsteps. She did not rush at the first sound. She waited until the latch lifted and Arun stepped inside, wet and tired, carrying an empty basket and a small jar of lamp oil. "The lower bridge was covered," he said. "I waited at the mill until the water fell, then came by the cedar road." Lian touched his sleeve and felt the cold rain upon it. Relief moved through her so quickly that her knees became weak. She wanted to tell him how many times she had opened the door, how many dangers she had imagined, how long the road had seemed. Instead, she took his basket. "The rice is warm," she said. Arun sat near the stove while she filled his bowl. Beneath the porch, the lamp continued to burn, though it was no longer needed to guide him. Its light rested on the wet stones, steady within the moving rain. Lian closed the door softly. She understood that the lamp had never controlled the road. It had simply made the home visible. And sometimes, that is all love is asked to do. By morning, the lamp beneath Lian's porch had burned low. Its final flame leaned once in the pale air, then disappeared, leaving a thin thread of smoke above the wet stones. Along the road, merchants began moving again after the storm. guiding carts around puddles and lifting their robes above the mud. Among them was a cloth seller named Ravo. He had spent years traveling between mountain villages with bolts of cotton, dyed silk, needles, thread, and a wooden chest containing his accounts. He remembered every debt. He knew which family preferred blue cloth, which innkeeper paid late, and which road became dangerous after 2 days of rain. Ravo trusted preparation. Before each journey, he wrapped every bundle twice. He counted his coins at sunrise and sunset. He kept copies of important agreements beneath the lining of his chest. Because he had once lost a season's earnings in a flooded storehouse, he believed safety depended upon carrying proof of everything he owned. That morning, the rain returned while he was crossing a narrow valley. It came first as mist, then as heavy drops striking the cart cover. The mule lowered its head. Water began running across the road from the hillside. Ahead stood a stone bridge with a shallow shelter built beneath one end. Ravo led the mule there and waited. 2 farmers were already sitting inside with baskets of onions. A traveling musician held a wrapped, stringed instrument against her chest. There was room for Ravo, but not for all his goods. He left the cart beside the road and carried in the most valuable cloth. Then he returned for the wooden account chest, then for a bundle of silk, then for a box of metal needles. Each trip through the rain soaked him further. "The cart cover is strong," one farmer said. "Water finds weak places," Ravo replied. He went out again. By the 5th journey, the shelter floor was crowded with his bundles. The farmers had pulled their baskets close to make space. The musician sat with one knee raised because cloth filled the corner beside her. Ravo stood at the entrance, staring at the cart. One bundle of common cotton remained beneath the cover. He knew it was worth less than the silk, yet the thought of leaving it outside tightened his chest. Then a sound came from the hillside. It was not loud, only stones moving beneath water. One farmer rose and looked beyond the bridge. A brown stream had begun crossing the road above them, carrying leaves and small branches. If it grew stronger, the mule and cart would need to be moved to higher ground. "We should go up the eastern path," the farmer said. "There is an empty shrine above the flood line." Ravo looked at his bundles. The path was steep and narrow. He could not carry everything. "The water may fall soon," he said. The other farmer watched mud spreading across the road. "It may." Ravo opened the account chest. Inside were years of papers, tied in careful groups. Some recorded debts already paid, some listed goods sold long ago. Others contained the names of customers who had moved away or died. He had carried them because they were part of his business, and because throwing them away felt like admitting that their time had ended. The musician touched the bridge wall. Water was trembling through the stone. Ravo lifted one bundle of papers. The ink had faded on the outer pages. He remembered writing those lines beside lamps in distant rooms. They had once mattered greatly. Now they were weight. He removed the current accounts, his coins, and the few agreements still unfinished. These he wrapped inside an oilskin pouch. The rest he placed back in the chest. "Help me carry the silk," he said to the farmers. Together, they moved what could be carried. Ravo untied the mule, placed the necessary goods across its back, and left the cart beneath the bridge. The wooden chest remained inside the shelter. As they climbed the eastern path, rain struck the leaves above them. Ravo turned more than once to look back. Each time, the bridge appeared smaller through the mist. At the hilltop shrine, they found a dry room with an open doorway facing the valley. The travelers spread their things along the wall. The farmers shared onions and flatbread. The musician loosened the cloth around her instrument and played 3 quiet notes to test whether the strings were dry. Below, water covered the road. Ravo sat near the doorway with the oilskin pouch in his lap. He had not saved everything. Yet what remained with him was enough to continue the work that still existed. Sometimes we carry the past because it once protected us. A record, a habit, a story about who we must be, or a fear born from an earlier loss may have helped us survive another season. We do not need to despise these things. They may have served faithfully. But a shelter can become crowded with what no longer belongs to the journey. Letting go is not always a peaceful gesture performed beneath a clear sky. Sometimes it happens while the road is flooding and the hands are unsure. It may mean choosing what is alive now over what once seemed necessary. It may mean trusting that memory can remain even when the paper is left behind. Perhaps your mind is carrying old accounts tonight. Conversations already completed. Mistakes that have paid their lesson many times. Versions of yourself that were useful once, but have become heavy on the present path. You do not have to throw anything away by force. Simply notice what your inner hands are holding. Feel the difference between care and weight. The body may already know. A burden often asks the shoulders to lift, the belly to harden, the fingers to close. Allow the palms to rest. Let the hips and legs grow heavier against the bed. There is no flooded road here that you must cross before sleeping. The necessary things can remain near. The rest may wait beneath the bridge of memory without being carried through every night. By afternoon, the rain softened. When Ravo returned, the cart was still there, though one wheel had sunk into mud. The wooden chest had swollen, and many old papers inside were blurred beyond reading. He expected grief. Instead, he felt space. He rescued the empty chest, cleaned it, and later used it to carry food on long journeys. The lost accounts did not erase his years of work. The paid debts remained paid. The absent customers remained remembered. What had ended did not need endless proof. That evening, Ravo camped beneath a dry roof near the shrine. Rain tapped above him, lighter now. His small pouch rested beside his head. For the first time in years, he knew exactly what it contained. And because he carried only what the next day required, sleep found him before the rain had stopped. The night after Ravo left the hilltop shrine, rain followed him only as far as the northern ridge. Beyond it, the clouds thinned, and a pale moon appeared between moving branches. By dawn, he had reached a temple built above a narrow gorge, where travelers often stopped to rest before taking the steep road down. Near the temple gate hung an old bronze bell. It was not large, but its voice traveled far. When the morning air was clear, people in the lower valley could hear a single note crossing the roofs, touching the river, and fading among the hills. The bell was cared for by a young attendant named Sen. He polished its surface, checked the wooden beam, and replaced the rope whenever the fibers began to weaken. He loved the bell more than any other object in the temple. When he first arrived as a child, its sound had made him feel that the whole world was listening with him. Years later, he still waited for the moment after each strike, when the note widened through the air and seemed to hold the mountain, the clouds, and his own small life inside one trembling sound. But Sen disliked what came next. The note always faded. He would listen as it grew thinner, trying to follow it past the point where others heard only silence. Some mornings, he pulled the rope again before the first sound had fully disappeared. Then he struck a third time, hoping the overlapping tones might keep the air from becoming empty. An older gardener named Eno worked in the courtyard below. He heard these repeated bells while sweeping wet leaves from the stones. "Is there a ceremony today?" he asked. "No," Sen replied. "Then why does the bell sound as though it has forgotten it already spoke?" Sen rested one hand on the rope. "The sound ends too quickly." Eno looked toward the gorge, where mist was lifting from the trees. "Does it?" Sen thought the question foolish. Everyone could hear the note disappear. That afternoon, rain returned. It began softly upon the temple roof, then settled into a steady pattern that covered the mountain in sound. Sen stood beneath the bell shelter, waiting for a pause. He liked to strike the bell when nothing else disturbed its voice. The rain did not pause. He waited until evening. Water fell from the eaves in long, silver threads. The courtyard darkened. The gardener carried his broom into the tool room and lit a small lantern. "You have not rung the evening bell," Eno said. "The rain will hide it. Then let it be heard inside the rain." Sen hesitated. He feared the bell would seem weaker, its tone broken into pieces by drops on tile and water in the gutters. Still, the hour had come. He took the rope in both hands and pulled. The wooden beam struck bronze. The note rose beneath the shelter, deep and clear. Rain touched it from every direction. Water on the roof made 1,000 small sounds, while the bell made one broad sound among them. Sen listened. At first, he tried to separate the bell from the storm. He searched for its pure edge, the tone he knew on dry mornings, but the rain would not move aside. It entered the hearing with the bell. Drops struck the courtyard stones. Gutters murmured. Leaves shook beneath the eaves. And still the bell traveled. Its voice did not defeat the rain, nor did the rain erase the bell. For a little while, they existed together. Then the bronze tone softened. The rain remained. Sen reached for the rope again. Before he pulled, Eno placed the broom against the wall and raised one finger, asking him to wait. They stood without speaking. The last vibration left the bronze. Nothing visible changed. The bell remained. The rope remained. The mountain remained. Yet the note was gone. In the space after it, Sen heard more than he expected. He heard water dripping into a wooden bucket. He heard a bird shifting beneath the roof. He heard his own breath, unhurried now that it was no longer chasing the sound. Eno lifted the broom and returned to the courtyard. Sen stayed beside the bell. He began to understand that the fading had never been a failure of the note. The sound was beautiful because it moved. It entered the air, touched what it could, and made room for what followed. If it remained forever, it would no longer be a bell. It would become a wall of sound, leaving no silence in which another voice could appear. So much of life is received in this way. A meal warms us and ends. A visit fills the house. Then the guest returns to the road. A season colors the trees and releases them. Even joy arrives with open hands, asking to be felt rather than imprisoned. Sometimes the heart believes that trust means keeping what is good. It wants a moment to remain, a person never to change, a safe season never to pass. When change comes, the heart may think something has gone wrong. But perhaps trust is also knowing that what is real does not need to remain unchanged in order to have been real. The bell's voice did not become meaningless when it faded. The warmth of a hand is not false because the hand later moves away. A peaceful evening is not wasted because morning comes. Beauty is not broken by its ending. You may notice tonight whether there is something you are listening for beyond its natural time. Perhaps part of you is trying to keep an old happiness sounding in the air. Perhaps you are comparing this season with one that has already passed. Perhaps you fear that letting a moment end means losing the person you were within it. There is no need to push it away. Let the memory ring once, gently. Hear what it gave you. Then notice the quiet that follows. Feel the breath complete itself without being held at the top. Let it leave. Another breath does not need the previous one to remain. The chest can soften after rising. The throat can rest. The space around the heart can be quiet without being empty. The next morning, the rain had stopped. Sen rang the bell only once. Its note crossed the wet courtyard, moved through the cedar trees, and descended toward the valley. He did not pull the rope again. He listened as the sound became thin, then thinner, then impossible to separate from the waking birds. When silence returned, Sen bowed his head, not because the bell had failed, but because it had completed what it came to do. Above him, drops still clung to the roof tiles. One by one, they released their hold and fell into the garden below. The drops that left the temple roof fell into moss, gathered along the edge of a stone path, and traveled toward the lower village. By midday, the clouds had returned, spreading a soft grey light over workshops, courtyards, and the long house of a weaver named Mira. Myra was known for cloth, so even that merchants held it toward the sun to admire the straightness of every thread. She selected her fibers carefully, washed them in clear water, and stretched them beneath the morning light. She liked the dry season, when the loom responded exactly as she expected, and the thread remained firm beneath her fingers. The rainy season made her uneasy. Damp air softened the fibers. Threads that had been tight in the morning loosened by afternoon. The wooden frame swelled. Colors took longer to dry. A pattern that looked precise one day appeared slightly changed the next. So Mira began to wait. She told herself she would start the important cloth when the air cleared. The cloth had been ordered by a family whose daughter would soon leave the village to marry. Mira had promised a pattern of cranes crossing a quiet sky, a design meant to carry wishes of courage and safe travel. On the first rainy day, she prepared the loom but did not weave. On the second, she sorted thread. On the third, she polished the shuttle and listened to water moving through the roof gutters. Each morning, she opened the door, looked at the clouds, and decided that true work would begin tomorrow. A week passed. The loom stood ready, yet empty. The colored threads remained in their baskets. Myra felt busy because she was preparing, checking, and protecting everything from the damp. But beneath that activity was a quieter truth. She was afraid to begin under conditions she could not fully control. One afternoon, a small boy named June came to deliver mulberry bark from his mother. He found Mira sitting beside the unused loom while rain tapped upon the roof. "Is it broken?" he asked. "No." "Are you ill?" "No." "Then why is there no cloth?" "The air is too wet." June looked toward the doorway. Beneath the eaves, a spiderweb stretched between two beams, Drops rested along its threads, bending the web downward. At the center, the spider remained still. "The web is wet too," he said. Myra followed his gaze. One drop grew heavy and fell. The web rose slightly. Another drop remained, changing its shape again.
That is not weaving.
Mira replied. June placed the bark beside the wall.
It is still a web.
Then he ran home, through the rain. Mira remained by the doorway. She watched the web move beneath each drop. It was not perfectly even. One side hung lower than the other. Some strands trembled while others stayed still. Yet the web had not failed because the rain had touched it. Its shape was meeting the weather. Myra returned to the loom. She chose a small length of plain thread, not the colored silk she had been protecting. She tested the tension. It was softer than she preferred. Instead of pulling it tighter, she adjusted the frame and passed the shuttle once. Then again. The loom made its familiar wooden sound, though slower now. Mira found that she had to listen with her hands. She could not rely on the dry season measure. The damp thread asked for gentler pressure. When she pulled too firmly, the edge narrowed. When she relaxed, the cloth opened. By evening, only a narrow band had formed. It was not perfect. It was alive with small changes, each one showing where the air had shifted and where Mira had responded. The next morning, rain continued. Myra began the crane cloth. She did not wait for the loom to behave as it had in another season. She worked with the thread she had, in the air that was present. Some days she wove only a hand's width. On others, a wind passed through the house and the fibers tightened, allowing the shuttle to move more quickly. The cranes slowly appeared. Their wings were not placed against an empty blue sky as Mira had first imagined. She added fine silver lines around them, like falling rain. The birds seemed not to be escaping the weather, but traveling within it. When the family came to collect the cloth, Mira began to apologize for its slight variations. The bride's mother unfolded it across the table. The silver threads caught the dim light. The cranes moved through rain toward a place beyond the edge of the pattern.
It looks like a journey,
the woman said. Mira touched the cloth. She understood then that waiting for perfect conditions would not have protected the work. It would only have prevented the work from existing. There are moments when we postpone living until the inner weather changes. We tell ourselves we will rest when the questions are answered. Speak when fear has gone. Begin when confidence arrives. Or feel grateful when life becomes simpler. But the mind may continue making clouds. Trust can mean allowing one small movement before certainty appears. Not a reckless leap. Not a demand that fear disappear. Only the next pass of the shuttle through the threads that are here. And perhaps, at this point in the night, you do not need to follow every thread of these words. You are allowed to miss a sentence. You are allowed to drift for a while and return without knowing where you left. The story does not need to be held tightly in order to carry you. Feel how attention can soften without vanishing. Sounds may come closer, then move farther away. The weight of the body may seem clearer for a moment, then less important. Let the tongue rest behind the teeth. Let the space between the eyebrows widen. The breath may become shallow or deep, even or uneven. It is still a breath. Like Mira's cloth, rest does not need perfect conditions to begin. Weeks later, the rainy season remained. Water continued to darken the road, swell the door frames, and gather upon the spiderweb beneath the eaves. Myra no longer opened the door each morning to ask whether life could begin. She opened it simply to see what kind of day had arrived. Then she sat at the loom, placed her feet upon the wooden pedals, and listened for the tension of the present thread. Above her, rain moved across the roof without rhythm she could control. Below it, the shuttle traveled from one open hand to the other, carrying color through the changing air. The shuttle moved from one open hand to the other until evening settled over Mira's house. When she finally covered the loom, the rain had become finer, almost like breath against the roof. Across the village, wooden doors swelled in their frames, hinges darkened with moisture, and narrow thresholds shone beneath the lamps. At the upper end of the road stood a small temple guest hall. Travelers slept there when the mountain paths became unsafe, and villagers came when they needed a quiet place to sit. The hall had one wide door facing the valley. In dry weather, it opened easily. During long rain, the wood absorbed the damp and became difficult to move. The hall was cared for by a carpenter named Baron. He had repaired the beams after winter winds, replaced cracked floorboards, and carved the simple latch himself. He took pride in the way the door closed. When shut, its edges met the frame so closely that almost no wind entered. Then came a week of rain. One evening, Baron tried to close the door and found that it would not fit. The lower edge pressed against the floor. He lifted, pushed, and struck the frame with his shoulder. The door moved a little, then stopped. Cold mist entered the hall. Baron fetched a wooden mallet and began shaving the swollen edge with a small plane. Each curl of wet wood fell onto the threshold. He worked by lamplight until the door finally closed. The next morning, the air had dried slightly. When Baron opened the door, it hung loose in the frame. A thin line of daylight appeared along one side. He frowned. That afternoon, rain returned, and the door swelled again. Baron planed another narrow strip. The following day it loosened further. By the end of the week, the door no longer knew whether it belonged to rain or sun. In wet air, it still resisted. In dry air, it rattled. A widow named Sila arrived before dusk, carrying a basket of herbs. She often came to the guest hall to prepare tea for travelers. She found Baron kneeling beside the threshold, measuring the gap with a piece of string. "The door keeps changing," he said. Sila placed the basket near the wall. "The door?" "The wood," Baron replied. "The weather, everything around it." She looked at his tools and the pale shavings scattered across the floor. "And you?" Baron did not answer. Rain began tapping upon the outer steps. A family soon appeared through the mist. 2 parents, a grandmother, and a child wrapped in a reed cloak. Their sandals were covered in mud. Barin opened the door, and they entered with grateful bows. The child stood near the threshold, watching water fall from the roof. She seemed reluctant to move farther inside. "You may come in," Sila told her. The child looked at her wet cloak. "I will make the floor dirty." Sila placed an old woven mat just inside the doorway. "Then the mat will meet the mud." The child stepped onto it. Baron watched Sila spread another mat beneath the dripping cloaks. She did not try to keep every drop outside. She also did not let water run across the whole hall. She gave it a place to land. Later, after the travelers had eaten, Beren tried once more to force the door fully shut. Seetha stopped him. "Leave it open a hand's width," she said. "The rain will enter. Some air will enter. The roof will still cover us." Beren looked at the narrow opening. Beyond it, darkness moved with silver rain. Inside, the lamp flame leaned slightly but did not go out. They sat in the hall while the family slept. The door remained partly open. Through the gap came the sound of water striking bamboo, the smell of wet earth, and a cool current that softened the smoky air. Beren had believed shelter meant complete separation. Dry on one side, rain on the other. Silence inside, weather outside. Yet the hall remained a shelter, even while the night was heard within it. In the morning, he removed the door from its hinges. He did not shave it thinner again. Instead, he adjusted the lower pin so the door could rise slightly when the wood swelled. He added a small covered channel beneath the threshold, allowing any water that entered to flow back outside. He repaired the latch so it could hold the door closed, open, or resting between the two. The door no longer had only one proper position. There are times when we try to protect the heart as Beren protected the hall. We want no uncertainty to enter, no disappointment to cross the threshold, no memory to disturb the quiet. We keep shaving away parts of ourselves in the hope that nothing painful will press against us again. But a life sealed completely against rain is also sealed against air. Trusting the flow of life does not require leaving every door wide open. Boundaries can be kind. A latch has value. A roof has value. We may step away from what harms us, say no when no is needed, and protect the quiet places where healing occurs. Yet protection becomes suffering when it demands that the world never touch us. The heart can remain sheltered without becoming closed. It can let a feeling enter, give it a mat near the threshold, and allow it to leave when its water has fallen. Perhaps something has been standing outside your inner door tonight. A sadness you have postponed, a question without an answer, a tenderness that feels risky because it cannot promise what comes next. You do not have to invite it into every room. You do not have to become it. You may simply notice that it is there. Feel the quiet boundary of your own body. The blanket rests upon the skin. The bed holds you from below. Sounds remain around you without needing to enter deeply. Thoughts may pass near the doorway of attention. Some will fade outside. Some may step in, leave a little rain, and move on. Let the chest be a room with space. Let the belly be soft enough for one breath to cross it. The hands can rest without guarding every entrance. Your face may loosen while the night continues beyond the walls. During the next storm, Beren sat in the guest hall with the door open a hand's width. Rain darkened the steps. A traveler entered, wiped his feet upon the mat, and placed a wet bundle near the channel. The lamp bent in the cool air, then steadied. Nothing in the hall remained untouched by the weather. Yet nothing was overwhelmed. The roof held. The water found its path. The door moved with the season instead of fighting it. And through that narrow opening, Beren could hear the rain clearly without mistaking it for danger. The rain Beren heard through the open door traveled beyond the guest hall and down the stone steps toward the village square. It ran beneath benches, gathered around the base of the public notice board, and softened the paper signs pasted there by a scribe named Eren. Eren wrote letters for those who could not write, copied agreements for farmers and merchants, and kept records of births, marriages, fields, and deaths. People came to him when they wanted uncertain things made clear. A spoken promise could change in memory, but Aaron could place it on paper. A name could be forgotten, but he could write it in strong black ink. Because of this, the villagers often said, "Ask Aaron, he will know." At first, he heard those words with gratitude. Later, he began to carry them like a title. He answered quickly, even when he was unsure. He kept old records long after they were useful. When two neighbors disagreed, he felt responsible for finding the sentence that would settle everything. If someone asked which road was safest, when the rain would end, or whether a distant child would return, Aaron disliked saying, "I do not know." Those words seemed too empty for a man surrounded by ink. One afternoon, a storm entered from the western hills. Wind pushed rain beneath the awning of the square. By the time Aaron reached the notice board, water had soaked the lower pages. The ink on a market announcement ran into blue-gray streams. A list of names blurred at the edges. One paper loosened and folded over itself. Aaron carried everything into his office and spread the pages across the floor. He worked late, trying to restore them. He compared letters, traced missing lines, and guessed where washed ink had once stood. The harder he looked, the less certain he became. Near midnight, a woman named Hannah arrived with a small lantern. Her brother had left 3 days earlier to visit a village beyond the northern pass. Because of the storm, no messenger had returned. "Do your records show when the pass closes?" she asked. Aaron searched through a wooden box. He found notes from previous years. One storm in early autumn, another after the first frost, a landslide during a summer of heavy rain. None could tell him what the mountain was doing that night. "The pass may still be open," he said. Hannah looked at him carefully. "Maybe?" Aaron reached for another bundle of papers. "The rain could weaken by dawn." Could. Her worry made him want to offer something firmer. He studied the records as if certainty might be hiding between two pages. At last, a drop fell from his sleeve onto the document before him. The old ink widened, and one carefully written date disappeared. Aaron stopped. The room held only the sound of rain on the roof and the small flame inside Hannah's lantern. "I do not know whether the pass is open," he said. Hannah lowered her eyes. For a moment, Aaron feared he had failed her. Then she sat beside the doorway. "Neither do I," she replied. They remained there together. Aaron made tea. He did not search for another record. Hannah did not ask for another prediction. The rain continued above them, sometimes loud, sometimes soft, without becoming an answer. After a while, Hannah spoke about her brother. She remembered how he always stopped to repair loose straps before climbing. She remembered that he knew 2 shepherd families along the northern road. She remembered that he disliked crossing flooded streams and would rather wait beneath a tree than hurry through dangerous water. None of these memories guaranteed his safety. Yet speaking them allowed her fear to become more truthful. It was no longer a shapeless storm in the mind. It became love, uncertainty, and a brother traveling somewhere beyond her sight. Aaron listened. For years, he had believed people came to him only for words that closed a question. That night, he discovered they might also need a place where the question could remain open without being carried alone. At dawn, a traveler arrived from the northern road. The pass had been closed for several hours, he said, and those approaching it had taken shelter at farmhouses below the ridge. Hannah's brother was likely among them. Likely, not certainly. Yet Hannah breathed more easily. She thanked Aaron, lifted her lantern, and went home to wait. Later that morning, Aaron returned to the wet notices. He separated what could still be read from what could not. On the damaged list of names, several lines had vanished completely. He could have guessed them from memory. Instead, he left the spaces blank until the families came to confirm them. The blank spaces no longer appeared shameful. They were honest. Sometimes the mind believes trust must feel like confidence. It wants a clear sign, a final prediction, or a sentence that removes every doubt. But there is another kind of trust, quieter and more humble. It says, I do not know what comes next, and I can still meet this moment without inventing an answer. Not knowing is not the same as being helpless. Aaron could make tea. Hannah could remember her brother's good judgment. Villagers could offer shelter. Travelers could wait for safer ground. Action remained possible, even when certainty did not. Perhaps you have been trying to write tomorrow in permanent ink. You may have searched the faces of others, repeated old conversations, or studied every small sign, hoping one of them would tell you exactly how life will unfold. The mind does this because uncertainty feels like an empty page. Yet an empty page is not a threat. It is simply unwritten. Let the forehead rest, as though no answer needs to be placed there. Allow the eyes to settle behind their lids. Feel the back of the head supported. You do not need to keep watch over every possible sentence the future may contain. A thought may form and blur. Another may remain unfinished. The rain can touch the roof without writing a message meant only for you. As the day brightened, Aaron cleaned his writing brush and placed it beside a fresh sheet of paper. At the top, he wrote the date. Beneath it, he left a wide open space. Before, such emptiness would have made him uneasy. Now it felt spacious enough for whatever was true to arrive. Outside, the damaged notices dried in the morning air. Some words returned clearly as the paper lightened. Others were gone. Aaron did not chase them into the rain. He opened the office door, listened to water falling from the eaves, and waited without pretending that waiting was the same as failure. The open space beneath Aaron's date remained untouched through the morning. Outside his office, rain moved along the street in thin silver lines, passing the rope-maker's shop where coils of hemp hung from beams beneath a deep roof. The shop belonged to a woman named Nyla. For many years, she had twisted rope for wells, ferry posts, roof frames, grain carts, and mountain bridges. She knew which fibers could bear weight, which knots tightened under rain, and which cords should never be trusted after long exposure to damp. People often praised the strength of her work. Nyla accepted their praise quietly, but inside she carried a private belief. She thought the ropes were strong because she had made them alone. Her husband had once worked beside her, turning the long wooden wheel while she fed fibers into the twisting line. After his death, Nyla refused every offer of help. She learned to turn the wheel with one foot, guide the hemp with both hands, and keep the strands from tangling across the floor. When neighbors said the work was too much for one person, she answered, "One careful hand is better than two careless ones." Over time, this sentence became more than an opinion. It became the wall around her life. One rainy afternoon, a messenger arrived from the temple guest hall. The storm had loosened a supporting rope beneath the eastern roof. The old rope had not broken, but several fibers were frayed. A replacement was needed before night, when the wind was expected to rise again. Nyla examined the messenger sample and chose 3 bundles of strong hemp. The rope had to be long, even, and tightly laid. Under dry conditions, the work would take most of a day. In the damp air, the fibers would be heavier and less willing to separate cleanly.
I will have it ready,
she said. The messenger looked at the darkening sky.
Shall I send someone to turn the wheel?
No. Nyla closed the door and began. She combed the hemp, divided it into lengths, and tied the first ends to an iron hook in the wall. Then she pressed her foot against the wheel. It turned slowly. The fibers began to twist. Rain struck the roof harder. At first, Nyla found her usual rhythm. Her foot pushed, her hands guided, the strands tightened and joined. But the floor grew slippery where water entered beneath the door. The damp fibers clung to her fingers. Whenever she paused to loosen them, the wheel slowed and part of the rope twisted unevenly. She untwisted that section and began again. By late afternoon, pain had entered her lower back. Her foot had begun to shake from pressing the wheel. Still, she would not stop. The temple roof needed the rope. To ask for help now would reveal that the work she had built her name upon could no longer be carried in the same way. A neighbor's daughter named Sori came to return a basket. Through the doorway, she saw Nyla leaning against the wheel while loose hemp covered the floor.
Let me turn it,
Sori said. You have never made temple rope. I have turned a wheel. That is not the same. Sori placed the basket beside the wall. No, it is only the part I know. Nyla looked at the unfinished rope. One strand had tightened more than the others. If she continued alone, she might finish before dark, but the result would carry the strain of her tired body. She moved her foot away from the wheel. Slowly, she said. Sori took her place. At first, the wheel moved too quickly. Nyla raised one hand, and Sori slowed. Then it moved too little. Nyla adjusted the fibers and nodded for another turn. They did not find the rhythm immediately. The rope thickened in one place and loosened in another. They stopped, opened the strands, and tried again. After a while, something changed. Sori no longer waited for every instruction. She began to feel the resistance of the hemp through the wheel. Nyla no longer watched only for mistakes. She listened to the soft pull traveling through the fibers. One guided, one turned. Then, when Nyla's hands needed rest, Sori held the strands while Nyla sat beside the wall and showed her how to keep the twist alive without forcing it. The rope grew across the workshop. Nyla had spent years thinking strength entered through her hands. Yet before her was a different truth. The rope did not become strong because one strand defeated the others. It became strong because separate fibers accepted a shared direction. Each one gave a little of its freedom. Each one received support from what lay beside it. No single fiber could have held the temple roof. By evening, the replacement rope was finished. Nyla tested it beneath her full weight. It held. The messenger returned with 2 temple workers. Together, they carried the coil up the hill. Nyla walked beside them beneath a reed umbrella while Sori followed, holding the loose end above the mud. At the guest hole, Baron the carpenter secured the new rope beneath the eastern beam. Wind moved against the roof, but the line stayed firm. Its strength could not be assigned to one hand, one strand, or one moment of work. Perhaps some part of you has been trying to hold the whole roof alone. You may be the one others depend upon. You may have learned not to ask because help once failed, arrived badly, or carried a cost. Self-reliance may have protected something important in you. There is no need to judge it. Yet even a strong life is woven from many conditions. Food grown by unseen hands, roads made before we walk them, words remembered from someone who cared, a bed built, cloth woven, water carried, a roof held by beams resting upon walls, resting upon earth. Trusting the flow of life can include letting support reach you. Not every hand must be invited into every task. Not every offer is right. But receiving wise help does not erase your strength. It allows strength to change shape. Feel the back of the body resting against what supports it now. You do not have to prove that you can hold yourself above the bed. Let the mattress receive the weight of the shoulders, the spine, the hips, and the heels. The breath itself is supported by air you did not create. Nyla returned to her shop after dark. Rain whispered across the roof. The wheel stood still beside the finished scraps of hemp. She gathered the loose fibers from the floor, but she did not remove Sori's basket. She left it near the wall, knowing the girl would return. Before closing the shop, Neela tied 3 short strands together and hung them above the doorway. Alone, each strand bent easily between her fingers. Together, they carried a small bronze lantern. Its light rested beneath the roof, while rain passed beyond it, and the braided cord held without needing any one fiber to be the whole rope. The bronze lantern above Nyla's doorway burned until the rain thinned near midnight. Its light rested on the 3 braided strands, passed across the wet road, and reached the faded sign of an inn farther down the hill. The sign showed a blue heron standing among reeds. Beneath the bird were the words, "River Rest House," carved by the innkeeper, Orin, when he was a young man. For more than 30 years, travelers had looked for that sign at the end of long journeys. Orin polished it each spring. He repainted the bird when sun weakened its color. If branches grew across it, he trimmed them back. The sign was not only an announcement, it seemed to hold the story of his life. Before the inn, he had been a porter carrying other people's goods. He had slept in stables, storerooms, and beneath carts. When he finally bought the small house beside the road, he repaired the roof, built 3 guest rooms, and carved the heron with his own knife. People began calling him Orin of the River Rest House. He liked the sound of it. During the long rain, the wooden post beneath the sign softened. One night, a strong gust moved down the valley. Orin heard a crack outside, followed by something heavy striking the ground. He carried a lamp to the gate. The sign lay face down in the mud. One corner had split. The painted heron was crossed by a dark line, and water was running through the carved name. Orin lifted it with both hands. The wood was heavier than he remembered. He carried it into the common room and placed it near the stove. No guests arrived that night. By morning, Orin had decided the travelers had passed because they could not find the inn. He stood beneath the empty post, watching the road disappear into rain. The next day, still no one came. He began to feel as if the house itself had become invisible. The beds were made. Rice waited in the storeroom. Dry wood stood beside the hearth, yet without the sign, Oren no longer knew what place he was keeping. A vegetable seller named Tavi stopped beneath the eaves to rest her basket. She had known Oren for many years.
Will you repair the heron?
She asked. When the wood dries. Tavi looked through the open door. The roof is not waiting to dry. Oren followed her gaze. Rain sounded above the common room. The stove gave off a mild warmth. A kettle trembled quietly over the flame. The road is empty, he said. For the moment. Tavi drank a cup of tea, thanked him, and continued toward the village. That evening, the rain grew heavier. Near dusk, someone knocked. Outside stood a young couple carrying a sleeping child beneath a woven cover. They had never seen the blue heron. They had noticed smoke rising from the chimney and light beneath the door. Is there a place to stay? The man asked. Oren almost looked toward the broken sign before answering. Yes. He gave them the warmest room. An hour later, 2 woodcutters arrived after finding the upper path blocked. Then came an old woman whose cartwheel had sunk into mud. By night, every room was occupied. Wet sandals lined the entrance. Cloaks dripped above clay bowls. Rice steamed in the kitchen. No one asked about the inn's name. The child woke and sat beside the stove, watching Oren repair a loose handle on a soup pot. One woodcutter added wood to the fire. The old woman folded blankets. The young couple carried bowls to the table. Oren stood in the middle of the room and listened. The inn had not disappeared when the sign fell. Shelter was happening all around him. It was present in the roof holding rain, in the bowls being passed from hand to hand, in the space made beside the stove for one more tired body. The name had pointed toward the house. It had never been the house. Later, when the guests were asleep, Oren turned the broken sign over. On the back, where the wood was plain, he saw old marks from the knife he had used as a young man. He remembered how carefully he had carved the words, believing he was fixing his future into the grain. Yet the future had not remained fixed. Rooms had been added. Friends had come and gone. His hair had grayed. The river road had shifted after floods. Even the heron's painted color had changed many times. Only his idea of himself had tried to remain the same. We often carry names in this way. The reliable one, the successful one, the difficult one, the helper, the one who was left, the one who always understands. A role may begin as a simple description, then slowly become a house we are afraid to leave. But no name can contain a whole life. A person is not only the work they perform, the praise they receive, the mistake they regret, or the place they hold in another person's story. These things matter. They shape us. Still, they are signs beside the road, useful for a time, never equal to everything beneath the roof. Perhaps one of your names has felt heavy tonight. You may believe you must remain strong because others know you as strong. You may be trying to prove that you are still the person you once were, or escape a label given during a painful season. There is no need to find a better name before sleep. Notice the simple life beneath every title. Warmth, weight, breath, the quiet rising and falling beneath the ribs. Let the throat soften where it has been holding words about who you should be. Allow the neck to rest without carrying the signboard of the whole self. You are here before any description is completed. When the rain ended 2 days later, Oren repaired the post. He could have copied the old sign exactly, but he did not. He joined the split corner, smoothed the damaged surface, and repainted the heron with fewer lines. Beneath it, he carved only one word: shelter. He hung the sign where travelers could see it. Then he stepped back and smiled at how small the word appeared beneath the wide roof. That night, no guests came. Oren did not take the silence personally. He closed the gate, banked the stove, and went upstairs to sleep. Rain began again after midnight, touching the tiles with a soft, even sound. The new sign moved gently in the wind. Inside, the empty rooms remained ready, without needing anyone to prove what they were. One of those empty rooms faced the eastern garden. Its sleeping mat had been rolled, its basin turned upside down, and its paper window closed against the rain. In the morning, Oren opened the door to let fresh air pass through. Beyond the window, a narrow path led toward a house where an old gardener named Daichi lived alone. For many years, he had cared for the plum trees behind the inn. He knew when to cut a branch, when to leave it untouched, and how rain changed the scent of bark before new growth appeared. Yet inside his own house, there was one place he never changed. It had been his daughter's room. She had left the village after marrying a boat builder from the southern lake. At first, she returned every spring. Then children came. Journeys became difficult, and the visits grew less frequent. Letters still arrived, though not always on time. Daichi read them beside the lamp and stored them in a wooden box. Her room remained exactly as she had left it years before. A blue shawl hung from a peg. A small comb rested beside the window. 3 river stones stood in a row upon the shelf. Daichi swept the floor, but never moved the objects. He changed the bedding each season, though no one slept there. When neighbors suggested using the room for tools or winter grain, he answered that his daughter might return. This was true, but it was not the whole truth. Daichi feared that if the room changed, something between them would change as well. The untouched comb, the shawl, and the stones seemed to hold the shape of the life they had once shared. As long as everything remained where she had placed it, part of the past appeared to be waiting rather than gone. During the long rain, one roof tile shifted. Water entered slowly at first. A dark mark appeared above the window. Then, in the middle of the night, drops began falling beside the shelf. Daichi woke to the sound. He carried in a bowl and placed it beneath the leak. The drops landed near the river stones. One had already rolled from the shelf and lay upon the floor. Daichi picked it up and returned it to its place. By morning, the mark on the ceiling had widened. The blue shawl was damp along one edge. Daichi removed it from the peg, but instead of carrying it away, he held it near the stove until the cloth grew warm, then hung it back in the same position. Rain continued. The next night, part of the plaster loosened and fell across the bedding. Nothing valuable was destroyed, yet the room could no longer remain untouched. Daichi stood in the doorway with a broom. He did not enter. For a long time, he listened to rain moving across the roof. The room looked less like a place waiting for someone, and more like a place asking to be cared for now. Oren came from the inn carrying spare tiles and a ladder. He repaired the roof while Daichi cleaned below. They worked without much speech. Oren lifted the bedding into the hall. Daichi folded the damp shawl. The comb, stones, and letters were placed together in a shallow basket. When the floor was clear, the room seemed larger. Daichi sat in the center of it. For years, he had believed that love lived in the arrangement of objects. Yet with the shelf empty and the bedding removed, he could still remember his daughter's laughter when rain trapped them indoors. He could still see her as a child sorting the 3 stones by size. He could still feel the afternoon she had wrapped the blue shawl around his shoulders and declared that he looked important. None of these memories had fallen with the plaster. The room had changed, but love had not vanished from it. A week later, a letter arrived. His daughter wrote that the lake had risen and travel would be difficult until the season turned. She could not promise when she would come. Daichi read the letter twice. In earlier years, such uncertainty would have sent him into the old room to straighten the shawl and dust the untouched shelf. Instead, he opened the paper window and let the smell of wet earth enter. He moved his gardening tools into one corner. In another, he placed a low table where he could sort seeds. The blue shawl remained, but folded inside the wooden chest. The 3 stones stood upon the table, no longer as guards of the past, but simply as stones his daughter had once loved. Sometimes grief is not only sorrow for someone who has died. It can also be sorrow for a season that has ended, a closeness that has changed, a home that no longer feels as it once did, or a version of ourselves that cannot return. The heart may preserve a room for these things. It may keep an old conversation untouched, arrange memories in the same order, and refuse to place anything new beside them. This is not foolishness. It is often love trying to prevent another loss. But memory does not require the present to remain empty. What has mattered can stay within us while the room is used again. A life can honor what came before without becoming a museum of waiting. The middle way is not forgetting, and it is not clinging. It is carrying tenderness forward in a form that can still breathe. Perhaps there is an inner room you have kept closed. You do not need to open it tonight. You do not need to rearrange every memory or decide what should remain. Only notice that the door exists. Feel the bed beneath you as a room already making space for this moment. Let the weight of the arms rest where they fall. Allow the knees to loosen, the ankles to become quiet, and the feet to receive the warmth around them. Nothing from the past is being taken away, because the body rests now. Rain may touch old places in the mind. A face may appear, a room, a voice. Let it arrive gently, without asking it to stay or leave. Awareness can hold memory as the roof holds rain, not by stopping its movement, but by giving it a safe place to be heard. Through the final weeks of the rainy season, Daichi used the room each morning. He cleaned seeds, repaired tool handles, and sometimes sat beside the open window with one of his daughter's letters. The room did not become less hers, because it also became his. One evening, a young neighbor came to learn how to prepare plum cuttings. Daichi showed her where to make the first small cut and how to wrap the branch without tightening the cord too much. They worked at the low table while rain sounded above them. On the shelf, the 3 river stones caught the lamplight. Nothing had returned to the way it was. Still, nothing precious had been lost by allowing the room to live again. From Daichi's eastern window, the sound of rain drifted across the lane and settled upon the roof of a small tea house near the market. The house belonged to a woman named Senna, who poured tea by day and sang in the evenings when travelers gathered beneath the broad wooden awning. Her voice was not loud, It carried because she knew how to leave space around each note. Merchants lowered their cups to listen. Farmers, resting after the road, often stayed for one more song. Children sat close to the stove and watched the steam rise while Senna's melodies moved through the room. People told her that her singing made tired hearts lighter. Sina treasured those words. At first, they were simple kindness. Over time, she began to depend upon them. Before singing, she watched the faces around her. If someone smiled, her voice opened. If a listener looked away, she wondered what she had done wrong. On quiet nights, she sang familiar songs because she knew where people would sigh or not. She still loved music, but part of her had begun measuring each note by the answer it received. Then the rain entered its heaviest week. The market closed early. Carts remained in their sheds, and the road beyond the tea house became a stream of brown water. By evening, only 3 people sat beneath Senna's roof: the cook, a stable boy waiting for the storm to soften, and an old basket seller asleep near the stove. Sina warmed the tea, cleaned the cups, and waited for more travelers. No one came. The stable boy looked toward the small platform beside the wall.
Will you sing?
Sina glanced at the empty tables. There is hardly anyone here. He seemed surprised. I am here. The cook laughed softly, but did not look up from slicing ginger. Sina felt a little ashamed. She took her place beside the wall and folded her hands in her lap. Rain struck the roof so strongly that she could barely hear the kettle. She wondered whether her voice would be lost beneath it. She began with a song about a bird crossing autumn fields. The first line rose clearly. The second was covered by water rushing through the gutter. On the third, Senna pushed harder, trying to lift her voice above the storm. Her throat tightened. The note became sharp and broke. She stopped. The stable boy was still listening. Was that wrong? He asked. It was not the note I intended. Outside, a deep gust moved across the roof. For several breaths, rain grew louder, then softened again. The boy tapped one finger against his cup. Not in a steady rhythm, only when a large drop struck the awning above him. The cook began humming the melody Sina had left unfinished. Her voice was low and rough from years of smoke. The basket seller woke, listened for a moment, and joined on the final phrase, though she remembered different words. Sina sat quietly. The song continued without waiting for her. It was not polished. The boy's tapping wandered. The cook entered too early. The basket seller sang one note lower than the others. Yet the melody remained alive, moving through each person in a different form. Sina began again, this time softly enough to hear the rain beside her. She did not try to defeat the roof. She let the water hold the wide background while the voices passed through it. When a drop struck loudly, she waited. When the cook changed the melody, Senna followed for a line rather than pulling it back. The song became slower than usual and less complete, but the small room grew warm around it. The basket seller closed her eyes. The stable boy forgot to tap. The cook set down her knife. When the last note ended, no one praised Senna. No one needed to. For a little while, they listened to the rain, occupying the space where the song had been. Sina noticed that the silence did not feel empty. The melody was gone, yet something in the room had softened. It had not been placed there by one voice alone. The next evening, more travelers arrived. One man told Senna that her old songs had been stronger. A woman said the new, quieter way of singing was more beautiful. Another listener spoke through most of the performance, and seemed not to hear her at all. In the past, Senna would have carried each response home. Praise would keep her awake with pleasure. Criticism would return long after the lamp was out. Indifference felt worst of all, as though an unheard song had never existed. That night, she remembered the melody traveling through the nearly empty tea house. It had changed when others held it. It had continued after her voice stopped. Its value had not depended upon remaining entirely hers. Praise and blame are much like weather passing over a roof. Both can be heard. Both may teach us something. A careful person does not ignore every response. Senna still practiced. She still noticed when her breath was strained or when a note did not serve the song. But she no longer asked every face to tell her who she was. There may be something you have offered to the world that did not return in the form you hoped. Care that was not recognized. Work that received little notice. Words that reached someone differently from how you intended. The mind may keep standing beside these moments, waiting for applause, apology, or proof that what you gave mattered. Yet an offering has a life beyond the hand that releases it. A kind sentence may be remembered without your knowledge. A small act may ease a burden you never see. And sometimes what you offer will simply pass by another person, like music beneath heavy rain. This does not make the offering false. It only means its path was not yours to command. Feel how the throat can rest when it is no longer asking the night for an answer. Let the tongue lie easily. Allow the muscles beside the ears and along the cheeks to soften. You do not need to listen for approval now. The roof receives the rain without deciding which drops have fallen correctly. Breath enters, leaves, and does not wait to be praised. Near closing time, Senna poured the final tea into a plain clay cup. She carried it beneath the awning and sat where the stable boy had tapped his finger the night before. The market was dark. Water ran between the stones. Somewhere beyond the houses, a frog called once, and then became quiet. Sina sang one short line into the rain. No one answered. The note traveled as far as it traveled, touched what it touched, and disappeared among the roofs. Sina lifted the warm cup to her hands and listened without reaching after it. The note Senna released into the rain traveled no farther than sound could travel. It passed beneath the tea house awning, crossed the dark market, and dissolved near the steps where Marrow was trimming the wick of the village lantern. Marrow had tended the road lanterns for almost 40 years. At dusk, he carried a pole, a clay jar of oil, and a small flame protected inside a horn screen. He lit the lantern beside the well, the one near the bridge, 2 along the market road, and 3 on the path leading toward the temple. He knew each lantern by its small habits. The bridge lamp smoked when its wick was cut too short. The market lamp leaned east after strong wind. The lantern near the cedar grove attracted pale moths on warm nights. Marrow liked seeing the lights appear one by one. When the 7th flame was burning, the village seemed complete. Roofs settled into shadow. The road became a chain of soft, golden circles, and travelers could move without placing their feet into unseen water. During storms, he checked the lanterns again before sleeping. That night, the wind rose soon after Sina's song ended. Rain struck the shutters, ran through the gutters, and pushed beneath the deep wooden covers above the lamps. Marrow stood at his window and watched the nearest flame bend until it vanished. A little later, the market lantern went dark. Then another. He put on his reed cloak, took the oil jar, and stepped outside. The rain was not violent, but it was steady enough to turn the road into moving black glass. Morrow reached the first lantern, dried the wick with a cloth, and lit it again. Before he had crossed the square, the flame disappeared behind him. He returned and tried once more. Again, the wind entered beneath the cover. Morrow adjusted the metal shield, added oil, and waited until the flame stood upright. Then he continued toward the well. That lantern had already gone out. He relit it, walked to the bridge, and found darkness there too. Soon he was moving back and forth through the rain, saving one light while another faded. Water entered his sandals. The oil jar grew lighter. His fingers smelled of smoke. No one had asked him to do this. The houses along the road were closed, and most travelers had already found shelter. Still, Morrow felt that if the village became dark while he slept, he would have failed the duty that had shaped his life. Near the cedar path, he stopped beneath an overhanging roof. Only the protected flame inside his horn screen remained. Across the road, a dog slept beneath a cart. Its body rose and fell slowly. Rain touched the wheels, but did not reach the place where it lay. Farther uphill, one house showed no lamp at all. Yet through the paper wall, Morrow could hear a family speaking softly before sleep. The village was dark, but it was not lost. He stood, listening. Water knew the ditch. The bridge held above the stream. Doors were latched. Roofs received the rain. People who knew the roads had already come home, and those still traveling carried their own lamps or waited beneath shelter. Morrow looked at the small flame he had protected against his chest. For years, he had thought his work was to prevent darkness. Yet every evening, darkness arrived before he lifted the pole. It filled the spaces beyond the lantern circles and rested between the houses. It had never been defeated. The lamps simply offered enough light for the next few steps. He turned toward the temple path. Instead of relighting all 3 lanterns, Morrow carried the final flame to the steepest bend, where rainwater sometimes hid the edge of the stones. He set the lantern there, cleaned its glass, and poured in what remained of the oil. The light was small. It did not reach the bridge. It did not brighten the market. It did not reveal the mountain beyond the temple roof. It showed one bend in the road, the wet steps beside it, and the trunk of a cedar tree. Morrow sat beneath the eaves nearby. For a while, he watched the flame as closely as he had watched every lantern in the village. It leaned, steadied, narrowed, and widened. A drop slipped through the roof and struck the stone beside his foot. Then he noticed how tired he was, not only from the night, but from years of believing that care required constant watchfulness. He had carried each darkness as a personal, unfinished task. Even after returning home, part of him remained outside, counting flames. The last lantern continued without his help. Morrow rested his pole against the wall. He placed both hands inside his sleeves and listened to the rain. When the wind moved through the cedar branches, the lights bent low. When the wind passed, it rose again. Nothing in him needed to rise with it. There may be a quiet watcher inside you as well. A part that checks whether everyone is safe, whether tomorrow is prepared, whether some small danger has entered the room. It may have served you with great devotion. It may have helped you through uncertain seasons. Tonight, that watcher does not need to be dismissed. It can sit beneath the eaves. One small light is enough for this moment. The breath entering now. The weight of the blanket. the place where your body meets the bed. No lamp is required for the road beyond morning. Let the muscles around the eyes stop searching through the dark. Let the space behind the forehead become unlit and quiet. The ears may receive the sounds that come, then release them. The whole body can be like a village after doors have closed, not abandoned, simply resting. Awareness remains, but it does not have to stand guard over every thought. A thought can pass beyond the circle of attention without being followed. Another can appear briefly, like a wet stone beneath lamplight, then return to shadow. Near dawn, the storm began to weaken. Mara woke beneath the temple eaves. He had not meant to sleep, yet his head had lowered against the wooden pillar and the pole lay untouched beside him. The lantern was still burning, though only a little oil remained. A vegetable farmer came up the path, carrying empty baskets. At the steep bend, she saw the light and stepped around the flooded edge. She did not know Morrow had spent half the night trying to illuminate the entire village. She only bowed as she passed. That was enough. Soon, the eastern sky grew pale. The road appeared without help from any lantern. Stones emerged, then trees, then the temple roof. The small flame became difficult to see in the widening morning. Morrow did not add more oil. He watched until the wick gave one final glow and went dark by itself. Above him, rain continued in gentle drops. Below, the village roofs slowly entered the gray light of dawn. Morrow lifted the empty lantern from its hook and carried it home, no longer believing that darkness had been waiting for him to defeat it. By the time Morrow reached his house, the rain had begun again. It did not return with thunder or sudden wind. It came as a soft gathering upon the roofs, one drop joining another until the whole village seemed to breathe beneath a single, wide sound. The water touched Morrow's tiles first, slid into the gutter, and fell beside the empty lantern he had placed near the door. It crossed the market roof where Senna's last note had disappeared. It darkened the rope above Neela's shop and gathered briefly on the new sign outside Oren's inn. No one came outside to stop it. The village had spent many days believing that rain was an interruption. Work had been delayed, roads changed, fires weakened, doors swelled, and carefully written words had blurred. Yet on this night, the rain did not seem to be asking the village for an answer. It simply arrived. At the lower end of the road, Luma woke when a drop fell into one of the clay bowls she still kept beneath the oldest part of her roof. The repair had held everywhere else. Only that narrow corner remained unfinished because the tiles needed several dry days before Sidon could set them properly. Once, the sound would have pulled Luma from her bed. She would have moved the bowl, checked the wall, and stood beneath the leak as if a tension alone could close it. Now she listened once. The drop landed near the center of the bowl. Nothing was overflowing. The floor was dry. There would be time for the roof when morning and weather allowed. Luma turned beneath her blanket and slept again. Farther downhill, the river rose around the ferry posts. Toma's boat moved gently against its rope. He had tied it in the new channel rather than the place where the river had flowed in earlier years. The current pulled from a different direction, but the knot held. Beneath the water, stones rested without asking the river to remember its former path. Near the pottery lane, rain reached the blue flowers beside Anji's garden wall. Water ran from the cracked jar and entered the same narrow line of earth where roots had spread through the season. The jar still could not carry water to the distant field. It did not need to. Mint leaves lifted beneath the drops, and the small flowers received what escaped. Beyond them, the rice fields lay dark and full. Nero's young plants had grown taller. Their stems bowed under the rain, then rose when the heavier drops passed. He no longer visited the field at night to measure them. Water entered through the gate he had cleared that afternoon and moved between the rows at its own quiet pace. In May's house, the old bowl beneath the roof was nearly full. She had not counted a single drop. Her grandmother, waking briefly, emptied it into a larger jar and returned it to the same place. May slept with one hand open beside her face. The rain continued over the monastery kitchen, where dry wood waited beneath the eaves, and damp branches lay with space between them. It crossed the guest hall roof, held by Nyla's rope, and past the door Baron had left open a hand's width. A little cool air moved through the hole. The lamp bent and steadied. No roof in the village made the rain disappear. Some roofs were old, some had new tiles beside weathered ones, some carried moss, some allowed a drop through when the wind arrived from the east. Their strength did not come from controlling the sky. They received what fell, gave it direction, and made a place beneath where life could continue. Rice could remain warm. A child could sleep. Wet clothes could hang. A letter could be read beside a lamp. Someone could wake in fear and find that the walls were still around them. This may be what trust feels like when it becomes quiet. Not the belief that nothing will change. Not a promise that every roof will hold forever. Not the certainty that no water will reach the floor. Trust may be the simple knowing that when one drop arrives, one bowl can meet it. When a road bends, a foot can take the bend. When a fire weakens, another meal can be made. When a room changes, love can remain, without keeping every object in its former place. Life does not ask us to hold the whole storm at once. Only this sound, only this breath, only the small part of the night touching us now. You may notice how often the mind gathers many future rains into one dark cloud. It brings tomorrow's decisions, next season's losses, another person's journey, and old mistakes into the same room. Then it asks the body to shelter from all of them at once. But the body is lying beneath one roof, in one night. Let the back be held by what is already beneath it. Let the weight of the head sink without needing to know what morning will bring. The arms may rest beside you, no longer carrying tools for repairs that cannot be made in the dark. The roof does not need your help to be above you. The rain does not need your permission to pass across it. Even the breath may be allowed to arrive without being made deeper or slower. It has crossed every anxious evening of your life in this same simple way, entering, leaving, making room. The body knows more about flowing than the worried mind often remembers. Blood moves. Warmth spreads. Tired muscles loosen when they are no longer asked to prepare for every possible road. For a few moments, there is nothing to manage between the two. A sound begins near one edge of hearing, moves overhead, and fades near the other. Another follows. There is no need to count, no need to decide whether the pattern is even. The night is not performing a message that you must understand. It is only raining. In the village, gutters filled and emptied. Bowls received and were poured out. The river accepted water from every lane without asking which roof it had touched. What fell upon the temple, the market, the inn, and the smallest house eventually entered the same moving current. No drop kept the name of the place where it landed. By the deepest hour, nearly every lamp had gone dark. The people beneath the roofs did not vanish with the light. They rested inside rooms that did not need to be seen in order to exist. And above them, the rain kept moving from tile to tile, never remaining long enough to belong to any one roof, yet leaving each roof washed, each gutter flowing, and each sleeping room gently enclosed within its passing sound. The rain that enclosed the sleeping rooms eventually reached the highest temple courtyard. Water slipped from the curved tiles, crossed the stone channels, and gathered among cedar needles scattered by the wind. Before dawn, a caretaker named Aya came out with her broom. She had swept that courtyard for more years than she could easily count. In summer, she cleared dry dust. In autumn, she gathered red leaves. During winter, she moved snow from the steps so visitors could climb safely. She liked the hour before the first bell, when the temple was quiet and every mark made by the broom could be seen. Aya believed a clean courtyard showed a settled mind. Because of this, she disliked sweeping in rain. The stones never stayed clear. Water carried needles back across places she had already finished. Leaves clung to the broom, then dropped behind her. Mud entered through the gate on the soles of anyone who passed. On that morning, a gathering was expected after sunrise. Several village families would come to sit together beneath the hall roof and remember relatives who had died during earlier seasons. Aya wanted the courtyard to receive them gently. She wanted no broken twigs beneath their feet and no blocked channel sending water across the steps. She began near the gate. The broom moved in slow half circles. Wet needles gathered into dark lines. Aya pushed them toward a basket, emptied the basket beneath the cedar trees, and returned to the stones. By the time she reached the center, the wind changed. A fresh scattering fell behind her. Aya turned and swept again. Rain thickened. Water ran from the broom handle into her sleeves. She cleared the western channel, then found the eastern one filling with small leaves. She opened that channel, returned to the gate, and saw footprints across the stones, where a kitchen helper had carried wood to the hall. The helper bowed in apology. Aya said nothing. She waited for him to pass, then swept the prints until only rain remained. The sky slowly lightened, but the courtyard did not become finished. Aya worked faster. Her strokes lost their long, even shape. The broom struck the stones. Needles broke beneath the bristles and became harder to gather. She lifted one basket too quickly, spilling half its contents back into the water. For a moment, she stood completely still. Rain touched her hair. A cedar needle landed upon the clear stone directly before her. Aya stared at it. She could sweep it away. Another would fall. She could sweep that one too. The tree held thousands more. A drop slid from the end of the needle and joined the water moving toward the channel. The needle turned once, traveled a short distance, and caught beside a stone. Nothing about this seemed careless. The cedar released what the wind had loosened. The rain carried what it could. The channel received the water. The broom had its part, but it had never been given the task of making the courtyard remain unchanged. Aya lowered herself beneath the eaves. She placed the broom across her knees. At first, she continued sweeping in her mind. She saw the gate, the footprints, the western corner, and the needles still hidden beneath the steps. Her body was sitting, but the inner caretaker remained in the rain. Then the first bell sounded inside the hall. Its voice moved across the courtyard without asking whether the stones were ready. Aya listened until the note faded. A second bell did not come. There was only rain, the channel, and the small movement of water around the cedar needle. She set the broom beside the wall. When the families arrived, they crossed a courtyard that was neither clean nor neglected. The main path was open. The steps were safe. Water flowed where it needed to flow. A few leaves rested against the stones, and wet footprints appeared behind every visitor. No one seemed troubled by them. One woman paused to watch rain falling from the temple roof. A child crouched beside the channel and floated a small leaf beneath the bridge of his hand. An old man wiped his sandals upon the mat and entered the hall. The courtyard received them without being perfect. Aya had spent many mornings believing that care was proven by completion. Yet no courtyard stayed swept. No bowl stayed empty. No floor remained free of footprints. The world continued touching every place she tended. The temporary nature of the work did not make it useless. A path cleared for 1 hour was still a kindness. A bowl washed for 1 meal still served. A body comforted for 1 night did not need to remain free of sorrow forever for the comfort to have been real. There may be unfinished things waiting beyond this night. A message not answered. A room not ordered. A choice not made. Work that will need your hands again when morning comes. The mind may stand over these things with a broom, trying to clear every leaf before allowing the body to rest. But rest is not a reward given only when the courtyard stays empty. Feel the places where effort has remained after the day ended. The slight holding in the arms, the firmness around the ribs, the feet still prepared to rise. Let those places know that the main path is clear enough for now. Nothing requires a perfect stillness. A thought may fall like one cedar needle. It may rest for a moment, move with the next breath, or remain near the edge of attention. You do not need to sweep after it. Another thought may leave a wet footprint. Let the rain soften its outline. The mind itself can become part of the weather, rather than the person standing outside it, trying to arrange every drop. Sensations come, sounds come, memories appear. Awareness receives them, but it does not need to turn each one into a task. Under the blanket, the body can be an old temple after the visitors have settled. The doors are closed against the cold. The roof holds the rain. The corridors do not need inspection. Somewhere within, a final bell has already sounded. Aya remained beneath the eaves while the gathering continued inside. She could hear low voices, the movement of cups, and long spaces when no one spoke. The broom rested against the wall. Rain cleaned the dust from its bristles. Water moved through the channels she had opened and around the leaves she had left. Nothing overflowed. Near midday, the clouds grew lighter. Aya rose, not because the courtyard was finally complete, but because it was time to prepare rice. She carried the empty basket toward the kitchen. As she crossed the stones, her own sandals left 2 clear prints behind her. She looked back once. Rain had already begun to fill them. At the center of the courtyard, the cedar needle remained beside the stone. The next breeze moved it a little, then let it rest again. No one returned to sweep it away. The cedar needle remained beside the stone through the afternoon. Rain passed over it, lifted one end, and set it down again. By evening, the courtyard had darkened, the gathering was over, and the temple doors were closed against the cooler air. Aya did not return with the broom. She finished the rice, washed the final bowl, and placed the kitchen ladle upon its hook. Then she crossed the covered walkway toward the sleeping hall. The rain was still falling. It moved from the high roof to the lower one, from tile to gutter, from gutter to stone, and from stone into the channel that led downhill. Nothing in its path tried to keep it. Inside the hall, several travelers were already asleep. One had left wet sandals near the entrance. Another had folded a traveling cloak beneath his head. A woman rested with one hand on a small bundle beside her, though her fingers had loosened in sleep. Aya lowered the lamp until the flame became small. The roof above them was old. Some beams had darkened with age. One had been repaired with a wooden brace. Another carried the pale mark of an earlier leak. The roof was not perfect, and it was not permanent. Still, for that night, it held. Rain struck the tiles in countless places, but beneath them, the sound became one soft field. No sleeper needed to know where each drop landed. No one had to follow the water from cloud to roof, from roof to gutter, or from gutter to river. The path was already being found. Aya lay down near the wall and pulled a plain blanket over her legs. For a little while, she listened as the caretaker inside her named small tasks. The eastern step should be checked. The empty oil jar should be filled. One shutter in the guest room had begun to stick. The thoughts were not wrong. They simply did not belong to this hour. She allowed them to remain unfinished. The step could wait beneath the rain. The jar could remain empty until morning. The shutter was closed well enough for the night. Outside, the cedar needle moved once more. Water turned it toward the channel, but a small ridge in the stone held it there. Aya did not know this. She did not need to know. Across the village, the same rain touched many roofs. It fell above Luma's kitchen, where a clay bowl waited beneath the one unfinished corner. It moved over the weaver's house, where a strip of blue cloth stirred faintly near the open doorway. It crossed the inn, the rope shop, the pottery lane, the ferry shelter, and the house where May slept without counting. Each roof received the rain differently. Some gave it a clean path into a gutter. Some let it gather in moss before it fell. Some answered with a deep wooden sound. Others held the drops so quietly that only the eaves revealed the weather. But beneath every roof, life rested without controlling the sky. You may be resting beneath a roof of your own now. Perhaps the sound above you is real rain. Perhaps it is the quiet movement of air, a distant road, a fan, or the deep silence of a house after everyone else has gone to sleep. Whatever surrounds you, let it surround you. There is no need to place yourself outside the night and watch over it. Feel the simple boundary of the body beneath the blanket. The skin does not need to decide what morning will bring. The bones do not need to hold tomorrow upright. The muscles along the back can give their weight to the bed. The belly can soften without solving anything. Even the small places around the eyes can stop looking into the dark for a sign. A thought may still come. Let it touch the roof of awareness and move on. Another may remain for a while, like water resting in a shallow place. It does not have to be pushed away. It will move when conditions move. This is not giving up. It is no longer asking the mind to become a wall against the weather. Trust has never meant that rain will not fall. It has never meant that every road will stay open, every fire will burn easily, every loved one will return at the expected hour, or every room will remain as it once was. Trust is smaller than that, and kinder. It is the next breath arriving without proof. It is the bed holding you before you test it. It is the roof receiving the rain while you are allowed to sleep below. The breath enters. The breath leaves. Between them, nothing is missing. If the mind reaches for tomorrow, let tomorrow remain beyond the eaves. It will come in its own light. Roads will appear as morning reveals them. Work will return to the hands when the hands are ready. Questions will still be questions, but they will no longer need to be carried through every hour of the night. For now, there is only this shelter, only this weight, only the soft, continuing sound above you. In the temple hall, the lamp finally went out. Darkness settled across the floorboards, over the folded robes, and along the wooden beams. No one woke to replace the flame. The roof did not disappear because it could no longer be seen. The walls did not stop holding because no one was watching them. Aya's breathing joined the breathing of the travelers. Different bodies, different dreams, one quiet room. Rain moved across the tiles and carried itself away. Far below, the river received water from every gutter in the village. It did not ask which house had known worry, which room had held grief, which hand had released a rope, or which person had finally stopped waiting for certainty. The river simply widened and continued. And you, too, may continue without following every movement. The night can carry what remains unfinished. The roof can hold what falls. The bed can hold the body. The breath can carry itself. Nothing more is required. The rain does not need to stop for peace to begin. It may continue above you, soft and patient, touching the roof in 1,000 places while you rest beneath it in only one. And one place is enough. One breath is enough. This moment is enough. The rain keeps falling. Some drops hurry along the tiles. Others pause at the edge and gather before releasing. None are late. None have failed. Each one completes its small journey without asking the sleeping house to understand. You no longer need it to end.